It is officially Black Monday in the NFL. Which coaching openings are the most attractive for dynasty owners? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That is $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is a very happy Kate Madjuk. Check her out on Twitter at Kate Madjuk because her Steelers officially made the playoffs. You can go read her work at Behind the Steel Curtain and Pro Football Focus. Kate, today we are doing some Black Monday across the NFL. We've already had several coaches get fired. We're waiting for more news, but we want to talk about the coaching spots or the jobs that are open and the ones that have the most value for dynasty managers. And I think we have to start in Atlanta, correct?
Yeah, I think we do. We finally got the word on Sunday night that Arthur Smith is officially out, at which point you may have heard a collective scream of joy throughout the universe. And that collective scream was one from dynasty managers who are just so excited to see Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, Drake London all be relieved of their shackles. Now, that it's an interesting spot, right? Because as a head coach, you're coming in, and really the last kind of missing piece in this puzzle is the quarterback position. And you come in, the 8th overall pick, obviously not a prime spot to land one of these like top 2 or 3 quarterbacks, but could be a position where you might have that draft capital to go up and get your guy. And then with the improvements they've made on defense in the past season, like you might be suddenly set. Boom.
Yeah, I agree. Now, a lot of people are going to say the Chargers is the most attractive job out there because they have Justin Herbert and you're playing in LA. The only problem with that job, well, there's a couple of problems. One, you have a cheap owner. Two, you don't even have your own stadium. You share that with somebody else. Three, you are way over the salary cap and you have a really aging roster. And four, you're in the same division as Patrick Mahomes. Like that's not fun. Atlanta to me is the one that I would be the most interested in. You play in great weather. You're going to be playing in a dome at least 10 times a season because of your team and the Saints and that other stuff. But you also have this really good foundation, Kate, of a good running back. I think Drake London is a really good receiver. Kyle Pitts, we know his upside. The offensive line's good. This is a spot where I think like a Ben Johnson from the Detroit Lions has to look at it and be like, hey, if I can get my version of Jared Goff in Atlanta with all of these weapons and with an improving defense and a division that's kind of devoid of like other star quarterbacks, why can't I take this Falcons team and make them an 11-win team right away?
Yeah, I think the pathway here is pretty clear. And there's also a number of quarterbacks that could be on the market here via trade. Like, even if you're not going to have one of these top end quarterbacks in the draft, Kyler Murray, rumored to be on the trading block. Justin Fields, rumored to be on the trading block. Like, there are so many different avenues that an offensive minded coach can step in right away and again just kind of take this team right away to a division title, which that's got to be super attractive. Now for dynasty managers, it's kind of interesting because we're talking about this team and what could be, and I feel like all of these guys are kind of already priced to reflect that high upside. I think the one asset right now that might be the most intriguing from a cost standpoint, given the coaching change, is Kyle Pitts, who has continued to fall down the ranks in Dynasty. Obviously, started off his career red hot. I don't think he was fully healthy this year.
No.
Nonetheless, like not having a quarterback that can deliver him an inaccurate ball. Sitting right now, tight end 8 behind George Kittle, 30-year-old George Kittle. Tell me you're not going to be all over that Kyle Pitts pricing, especially knowing that a new era is to come.
I think it really depends on the coach. And this is why this one is so fascinating for me from a dynasty perspective, because Kate, if they go out and hire, I was going to say Dan Quinn, but they already had Dan Quinn, Raheem Morris, the Rams defensive coordinator, to run this team. I think Raheem Morris could be a really good hire. I don't expect him to be the guy that instantly makes this offense 10 points per game better. But
Here's the question though, like, if you are an organization that has invested that kind of draft capital in the offense, why wouldn't you be getting a defense or an offensive minded head coach? That is my biggest
I agree. But there's some coaches want to have, or some organizations, they want to have a defensive minded, tough head coach to become, more of a physical team. But I know, I agree with you. I think if I'm the Falcons, you have to go out and get the best offensive mind to help you unlock these players, whether that's Ben Johnson or Bobby Slowick or whoever you go out and get. The reason I mentioned Ben Johnson, Kate, is because we've already seen like that offense support 2 running backs, David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, a number 1 receiver in Amon-Ra St. Brown, and a number 1 tight end, and Sam Laporta. If we saw Ben Johnson go to the Falcons, I kind of think everybody's a little bit undervalued. You'd have Drake London, who's going as wide receiver 22 right now. I think you would see his value shoot right up. Obviously, I think Kyle Pitts would go up as well. Bijan, you can't really get any higher. That's what I'm hoping for. I'm just not super optimistic that's where Atlanta's going to go.
Interestingly, there are not a ton of trades involving Kyle Pitts right now, though. This past month, Dynasty Startup ADP, this was the lowest Kyle Pitts has ever been drafted on average in Dynasty Startups over at dynastyleaguefootball.com. The most recent trade we have, and I think it's probably a pretty fair one here, tight end Sam Laporta and a 2024 third-round pick for Kyle Pitts and Christian Watson.
I probably take the Kyle Pitts side.
And see, like that's a fair trade, but I think the lack of trades tells you that throw an offer out there.
I think people are just waiting to see what happens, who ends up being the quarterback and who ends up being the head coach here.
I think that's fair, but I also think that if you yield some positive results in each of those columns, you're not going to be able to trade for him much longer. So
I agree. So the Falcons job isn't the only opening that we got on Monday. The Washington Commanders are going to have a new head coach in 2024. Let's discuss that situation next. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. At the start of the new year, every small business owner is asking themselves the same question. What's the one move that I can make that'll take my business to the next level in 2024? LinkedIn Jobs knows that your success all depends on the team that you surround yourself with. That's why LinkedIn Jobs has created the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have this many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number 1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn also knows that these businesses are wearing so many hats that they might not have the time or the resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, that process is now so quick and easy. To post your job for free, just go to linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty podcast. We want to let you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Okay, let's talk about the Washington Commanders, who officially let go of Ron Rivera on Monday morning. This has to be a really attractive job considering the Commanders have the number 2 overall pick in this draft. They've got weapons in Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson, even though he doesn't really ever do anything, Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson. What do you expect to happen here?
I really like this new era for the Washington Commanders. I think this is probably the most attractive coaching position right now, just because of the opportunity to get your franchise quarterback. You have a new era, just a ownership that I think has really signaled a willingness to impart change, and that is probably what is going to make this job so attractive. Now, again, probably going to mean parting ways, or not parting ways, but relegating Sam Howell back to the benches, and that's okay. But man, if you are a manager for Terry McLaurin, especially, like, this might actually be the first year that you have quality quarterback play
Mhm.
to deliver a ball. And I think we've seen Terry McLaurin, we've seen the play on the field shows him as one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. You watch him play, you see him do all of those little things right. And it hasn't translated to fantasy production. I do think that in a big part is due to that lack of quality quarterback play. So signaling a new era. But my biggest question is, so, Arthur Smith, obviously, that situation, they have a number of top end skill position players that all have a ton of draft capital associated with them. Here in Washington, obviously you have Jahan Dotson, first round pick, Terry McLaurin, he's established his role.
Mhm.
But all of these other roles, I do feel like they don't have the draft capital associated with them. Like, is there a chance that we kind of come in and you see the next head coach want to make this team their own? They're gonna draft their own quarterback. Maybe they
Yes.
they fill out their own running backs room. Like, this might be a less than positive thing for the rest of the skill position players in this group.
It's a fair point. Like, I could see somebody like Curtis Samuel just not being a favorite of the new coach. I think Terry McLaurin fits just about every team and every scheme, so I'm not really worried about him. But I do worry about, like, Brian Robinson. Maybe you'll see the new coach bring in somebody who's a little bit more dynamic as a receiver out of the backfield. Um, I'm not going to worry too much. I think whatever coach takes this job is going to have a pretty long view, and they're probably going to be coaching Caleb Williams or Drake May. But I am interested to see what the Commanders do here. We got a report this morning that they've requested interviews with Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. So that's the Lions offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator. Okay, again, I've got to assume, after having a defensive minded head coach for the last several years in Ron Rivera, and knowing that it's not a lock, but it's pretty likely that the Commanders are going to draft a quarterback at number 2. You would want to get him somebody that can work with him, and develop him. So again, this is another spot where I'm curious to see what type of head coach do the Commanders bring in to work with Drake May or Caleb Williams.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. Now, in this entire scheme, I think the biggest probably question is what to do with Brian Robinson, and how does Brian Robinson's just overall trajectory in this new coaching offense, like, what does that mean? Are you holding Brian Robinson? Because he's probably the player that I'm most concerned with
I'm
in
buying.
terms of
I'm buying.
your
I just
buy.
think he's objectively a good player, and I think whoever the coach is going to want to get him a lot of touches. We saw him make some more plays as a receiver yesterday. I I think there's a chance that his value could skyrocket depending on the offensive coordinator. I don't see it falling. It would have to be a pretty bad hire for me to really get concerned. But I think there's a chance that we just see it skyrocket if it's Bobby Slow or Ben Johnson or somebody of that caliber with an offensive backfield.
Brian Robinson right now being drafted on average as the RB 23
That's way too
in
low. Way
Dynasty
too low.
League football, 24 years old, 6'2", 225 pounds. Now, you did mention the one thing that I think is kind of like the kicker for Brian Robinson, not necessarily a super well-rounded back. They've used him more on the first and second down role, not so much in the receiving game. They've really relegated Antonio Gibson to that. And of course, why wouldn't they? He's a converted wide receiver. So that makes sense. But the only concern is, again, a lack of draft capital, a lack of, maybe dynamic nature to Brian Robinson's play, that there is a chance that, maybe the new head coach comes in and they want a guy that can do both. So interesting question mark there, but obviously, like, we saw Brian Robinson, he was the better B Robinson than Bijan
Great.
Robinson this year. Like, anytime you saw the rankings and you saw B Robinson ahead, it was actually usually Brian Robinson that
Yeah.
had that.
I,
So we've seen the upside as a pure rusher. But I do think that he's the player on this offense with the probably widest range of outcomes here with a change at head coach.
Again, I hate that I'm mentioning the same name over and over, but it's convenient in Brian Johnson. If Brian Johnson ends up being the head coach in Washington,
Ben Johnson.
sorry, Ben Johnson. I apologize, Ben Johnson. I think I would have no problem ranking Brian Robinson as a top 12 dynasty running back. That's how much I would move him
Ooh.
up.
That's spicy, spicy bold. I'm not that bold, but I like it.
Maybe it's because I've had like 5 cups of coffee this morning, but I can see a situation where Brian Robinson just becomes the workhorse and he becomes the David Montgomery or the Jamal Williams that we've seen Ben Johnson be over the last, or that we've seen Ben Johnson kind of lean to when he was in Detroit. Okay, we've got some other openings that were already announced this year, such as the Chargers, the Panthers. Yuck. But there's one that's really interesting to me that I want to discuss when we get back. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That is $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. Now, listen, I don't give you a lot of suggestions here, but go over to FanDuel right now. Take a peek at that Steelers money line against the Bills. I'm just telling you, the game is going to be way closer than what the spread is right now. So check that one out. But go to FanDuel. The app is so easy to use. There's so many different ways to bet, like live same game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab, or you can make a parlay on the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays and so much more. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make your first bet a layup with FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Everydayers, we've got a busy week of shows for you lined up. We're going to be doing some rookie talk at the end of the week, kind of recapping where we're at with this 2023 rookie class. We're going to get you prepared for round 1 of the playoffs. We've got some unbelievable games. So make sure that you guys are downloading the Locked On Dynasty podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Kate, I want to talk about this Raiders job because this one is fascinating to me. We got a report this morning, actually, from Jordan Schultz of Bleacher Report that there's mutual interest between Jim Harbaugh and Las Vegas Raiders. You saw the Raiders players yesterday after they beat the Broncos, like, vehemently say that we want Antonio Pierce as our head coach. I believe they went 4-4 in the 8 games that Antonio Pierce was the head coach. This one's fascinating for me because, Kate, I could see a situation where Harbaugh comes in and instantly catapults the value of everybody on this offense, whether it's Zamir White, Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, Michael Mayer. But I also could see Antonio Pierce being the right hire because of how hard everybody plays for him. But if you've seen how this team has played over the last 2 months, it's very much a ball control, grinded out style of offense. I'm fascinated by what the Raiders are going to do here.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what we've seen kind of unfold in this new era, and I definitely think that, like, from a gut check standpoint, Antonio Pierce feels like the right move. I just think from a organization that I think could probably benefit from a boost in morale. There was no better boost in morale than Pierce in that locker room. And you saw immediately out of the gate, everybody came out to absolutely fight like a dog for this guy. And it was incredibly fun to watch. I think having some of that consistency is a good thing. Now, obviously, you mentioned the defensive side of the ball, I think, kind of dominates here for Pierce, which that could play huge into the favor of Zamir White, who we have Josh Jacobs. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't expect him back
No,
in
I don't
with the Raiders here. Gonna hit free agency after playing on that 1-year deal following the franchise tag. Zamir White could be the biggest winner of them all. And again, you look at, Dynasty startup ADP. I mean, you can get him for a song, RB 59 in December's batch of Dynasty startup ADP. And again, like no circumstances have really changed here. We knew all along that there's a very small likelihood that Josh Jacobs would return to this offense, going behind Izzy Abinaconda, Rico Dowdle,
By the way, I don't think that's
Elijah
going to hold up.
Mitchell. Come on.
I think we're going to see Zamir White's dynasty value skyrocket because he got to play a lot over the last month, and
He looked good.
Against the Broncos on Sunday, 121 yards. Against the Colts, he was over 100 yards. Against the Chiefs, 145 rushing yards. Against the Chargers, he was at like 90 yards and a touchdown. He looked good, and I think they're going to lean into him being the RB1 next year.
Yeah, I think out of all of these assets here, especially if Pierce is the guy, I want Zamir White on pretty much all of my dynasty rosters. Obviously had a concerning injury history coming out of college, but I mean, he's been handling a workhorse role and he's looked really healthy doing it. 24 years old, minimal touches at this point in his professional career. Like, go buy Zamir White.
I agree. Now, the other name I want to mention, because this one's tricky. We haven't heard what's going on with Bill Belichick yet. He talked this morning about how he would be open to relinquishing some control of the front office. He's one of these guys where, like, if I have a lot of players on certain teams, like Atlanta, I don't really want Bill Belichick coming to my team, right? Because there's a lot of shenanigans that go on with Belichick running the offense, lots of rotations, likes to use lots of rotations at receiver. So I think on a real life perspective, I would be excited about Bill Belichick in certain teams, but for fantasy football, I don't really want Bill Belichick anywhere near my dynasty assets.
I think that's fair. Now, on the flip side, though, are there any players in the New England Patriots offense that you think are worth buying if this team is moving on from Bill Belichick? Like, with a fresh face in the building, are you going and trading for Demario Douglas, Hunter Henry?
No.
Anybody that
No.
Ramondre Stevenson?
Maybe.
Okay,
That's the
so
only
you're
one.
not hyped for a change
No.
of the guard here.
I think if New England gets rid of Bill Belichick, it's going to signal that a hard reset is coming in Foxborough. When I mean hard reset, I mean like tearing everything down, getting rid of all the older veterans, bringing in an entirely new scheme. And I think that's going to take a while. So no, I don't want any part of anything in New England if Bill Belichick leaves. And frankly, I don't know if I want him a part of it if Bill Belichick stays either.
Yikes. Sad state of affairs here in Foxborough.
It is. All right. Well, that's it for today's show. We're going to continue to monitor the head coaching moves. Just because the NFL playoffs start next week doesn't mean that we can't have coaching changes. Like, still lots of rumors being out there. Maybe Philly moves on from Nick Sirianni. We've got two different reports from Jay Glazer and Adam Schefter that the Pittsburgh won't fire Mike Tomlin, but he's not necessarily opposed to taking some time off either. So again, we will be on top of all this news over the next couple of weeks. We're going to continue to talk about the risers and fallers in your dynasty leagues, the rookies from the 2023 class. So make sure you are checking out the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Go check out the show on YouTube. We post videos every single day over there. Go follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Modjuk. I'm at Marcus _Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.